A pleasure to meet all at last, and welcome back once again to HJN Super Graphics. So for this segment in Season 4 of HJN, I feel like that Super Graphics wise, we've had a good amount of contenders to come talk about here, and I feel like that with a good amount of titles that I've discussed so far, I'm more than confident in going even further into the depths, and actually talking about big series that have been going on since the last time I did HJN Graphics. Basically talking about video games in this entirety. So what I'm going to do here for 2582 is talk a bit about something by Dovetail known as the Train Sim World Series, or TSW for short. Well, Train Sim World, or TSW for short, is in fact a series that has been published by the English software developing company known as Dovetail Games. Dovetail Games has had a good reputation when it comes to creating simulation-based games, and I've even left a good impression based on various experiences that I've had with the Train Sim World series. So I probably have a lot to talk about when it comes to this sort of thing. So I'll first get off by talking about the first Train Sim World game. The first Train Sim World game came out in 2020, and as the name implies, is a game in which the main goal is to operate trains from point A to point B, get your loads, whether it be passengers or cargo, to their destinations on time. And you have a load of different things that you need to be wary of. The perspective is mainly first-person view, although by clicking R3, you can basically shift the viewpoint to the outside of your train. This can be handy for if you're trying to look around the train itself by adjusting it with L3 as well as the left stick entirely. You can also utilize the camera in many different ways. This is certainly one of those games in which that it allows for the camera to work in a multitude of different fashions. By having the primary first-person perspective though, this does in fact allow you to feel like you're at the helm of a locomotive, whether it be diesel, steam, electric, or otherwise. And there's a good variety of different trains to choose from, but only in the later installments, all the way up to this point in 2025, with the latest installment, Train Sim World 5, do we have such a big variety of locomotives to work with, old and new, to be more specific. But Train Sim World, of course, as I've said, would not be the only contender. It would be accompanied by a second title released in 2021, in which that it was actually my first ever true experience with the game itself, in which that I drove a CSX locomotive, and was even accompanied by an AI conductor to the left of me. But I didn't quite get all that far into the game itself, and hadn't really experienced a good amount of things so far. The true experience that I had gotten over time, though, was in the third game, Train Sim World 3, released in 2022. And when this came out, I was more than excited to try it out. And when I did, it was unlike anything I'd ever seen before regarding simulation-based games. There's been a good amount of people on YouTube who have in fact had a lot of experience when it came to Train Sim World-based technology, as well as the unique creative function that it allowed for us players to observe and coordinate with. Train Sim World 3 was basically the true contender of the bunch thus far, but it didn't quite end there, although I'll get to the rest of them later. Train Sim World 3 did hit us pretty hard, offering a multitude of different DLCs. And these of course included American, Japanese, German, and other such railroads. There was even the famous English Southeastern Coast Main Line. Basically, a Southeastern Main Line was one of British Rail's finest rail lines. And even to this day, it still does operate as a major contender for freight and passenger traffic, especially when it came time to operating British Rail's high-speed network. Yeah, basically, the Southeastern Railroad's high-speed train was a big contender on the basis of inventory of locomotives and train sets that you could operate from Train Sim World 3. Another major contender was the ICE, or ICE train, Intercity Express. a popular German high-speed train that had been around since the 1990s and is in fact one of the most famous high-speed trains in the whole world. It offered the original version, which was known as the classic ice train, but there was also a modified, modernized version of the ice train that would come around as well. These of which, of course, were done with the best possible extent. Details on the engines are incredible, inside and out. The driver's cab definitely had a lot of switches, a lot of functionality that you can operate from. Throttles, brakes, buttons, horns, valves, lights, so many things you can possibly offer. Probably the best one that I've had to tackle on though is Cajon Pass. Yeah. If you're not familiar with Cajon Pass, well, it is one of the most infamous mountain passes in the city of California. Not just any cities in California, but also towns and villages. Cajon Pass is in fact a component and a minor piece of major arteries that allowed for the southern parts of the railroad, especially throughout California, to connect with various other components when it came to American railroading in California at the time. And it also stands as one of the most notorious stretches of mountain railroading due to the fact that it has a high gradient, 2.2% on average. If you were on road, 2.2% would mean absolutely nothing. However, the trains, it's insanely steep. A grade like this would require a lot of careful control and a lot of mastery over careful defensive maneuvering that you'd have to do. Some people consider driving down Cajon Pass by train as like driving off a cliff, which is kind of what it truly is. Going 2.2 feet for every 100 feet you travel is considered a 2.2% grade. And therefore, it makes it very steep. It's definitely nothing in comparison to other gradients in railroading, such as the Saluda grade in Carolina. Yeah, that at least was one of the steepest grades ever. Even more so than Cajon Pass. But the thing is that operating BNSF freight trains, intermodal, autorack, manifest, or anything else, it sure was a unique experience. But in case you were wondering, despite the title, these weren't just any simulators, they actually had consequences for any inactions. The most common of which is either you derail from going too fast over a curve, you run a red signal, or you crash into somebody. Yeah, just like in real life, those are big violations that lead to dangerous, even deadly consequences. So it definitely is a unique key point here that I intend to relay for this review. Like I said though, in spite of the third being an enormous game for what it is, and even allowing for you to have backwards compatibility with DLCs that came from the previous titles, including the Sandpatch grade with the CSX locomotives, Norfolk Southern's Horseshoe Curve line through Altoona, Pennsylvania, and even many others, including 2 Union Pacific lines, Sherman Hill, Wyoming, as well as Cane Creek. Yeah. Though, I will say, it gets even better though. Because what eventually happens is that we get ourselves some LMS steam locomotives. Yeah, the first ever steam locomotive DLC would come out a long time Train SimWorld 3's release. It was the first time that Train SimWorld players, including myself, would have a first-hand experience driving steam locomotives in the game itself. Eventually, we would be treated to another steam locomotive DLC in which another steam engine from the English side of railroading, known as the Fowler class steam engines, would come around as well. They were more towards freight than passengers. And while the LMS or London, Midland and Scottish Railway engines could also haul freight, much like the Fowlers, they were more accustomed to the likes of passenger travel. And that's mostly what each mission or job would take place. These little things about Train Sim World are more than important to worth mentioning, because the main gist is that you operate based on scenarios or even custom scenarios. Or there's even the free roam event in which that you can actually roam around the world for you to explore and assemble trains in any way that you like. But you gotta be careful of any oncoming traffic, because there are AI operated trains in the area as well. Some might stop for you in case you end up getting too close to them, or if they're coming your way. So that at least is helpful, but you really gotta watch what you're doing out there. Because I cannot help but wonder, many different times that I played the game, many different times that I've done the free roam option, and many times over have I actually made such errors, including that. But, like I've said, you got multiple ways to play the game itself. There's even the option to create your own custom livery. Yeah, basically, if you happen to go online with dovetailgames.com, they'll actually have the chance to offer you loads of new news. News that would, of course, encompass new locomotive DLCs, as well as even offering discounts to fans and subscribers of the club itself. I can't help but imagine, though, could we actually have more Steam Locomotive related DLCs? Like, how about have Union Pacific's Big Boy or 844, Rio Grande K36 class engines, or even the Sioux Line 1003? I don't know. We could even have, I don't know, a map like the Illinois Railway Museum, as that is one of the most famous Class 3 railroads of all time in the country. So I'm sure Dovetail will come up with something like that. But I really do want to have a lot more of the American-oriented railroads fixated in the game itself, because it does seem a little too heavy on both the British side, the Japanese side, and the German side of things. Not that it would be any negativity, but I feel like that some more inclusions for some American players of the games themselves would be pretty good to have. But once again, Train Sim World 3 wasn't the last thing we got, as Train Sim World 4 would come out a year after in 2023. Yeah. And what did that include? It also included a bunch of DLCs. There was the Flying Scotsman steam locomotive, which was another new DLC that we got along. There was also the Metrolinx Antelope and San Bernardino line. There was also a couple of other British Rail and German related routes as well, and even another high-speed train. So that's mostly just the basics of what the game originally came with and what you could also include in that. And not to mention, there were also DLCs that would come in between, representing different lines, representing different trains, representing different things that the railroad had covered in the US as well as elsewhere around the world. But of course, the latest installment that we got was in late 2024 with Train Sim World 5. Yeah, there's no doubt about it. It's almost like Dovetail is pretty much becoming the new Electronic Arts. Or, you know, one of those companies that has to pump out a game each year as well as have us dump our wallets out just to pay up for all the new hot stuff that's going on. And some people might agree that maybe this is their tactic in order to gain additional profits. I honestly would just simply feel for the fact that they could have one game and release a ton of DLCs to it. I mean, think about it. The Game of Life 2 came out in one game and had a lot of DLCs to come with it. And there was also lots of other games that we had gotten over the years that still continue to have DLC to this day. Like Destiny 2? I mean, come on my 25th birthday last year, they gave out probably the biggest DLC they might have ever made. A $100 value, that thing was. It was the biggest DLC they made in all of Destiny 2's history since its release in 2016. Like, that's a long time ago that the game came out. But having all of this new stuff, all of the stuff to keep us updated, all of the stuff to keep us Destiny players occupied until they come out with another DLC which I'm sure they probably will, by the way. I can't be too surprised about that. There's probably not going to be a Destiny 3, provided that all this stuff keeps going, but again, I get the feeling that Dovetail could just be using these new game releases each year in order to try to rake in additional profits in the same way that Electronic Arts has a lot of new rosters, a lot of new player name change-ups, player team switch-ups and all that, just so they'd have the excuse to release a new FIFA or NBA or NFL or MLB title every single year. I mean, really. Train Sim World is nothing like MLB or NBA or nothing like that. No. It's not like that trains are constantly changing each year. I mean, come on. What's the deal with all that? Why not just have one game and release a million DLCs? And you could probably update the game itself in order to run with new software capabilities and whatnot, and even probably reformat the game with the new engine known as Unreal Engine 5. But you know what? I'll tell you something really messed up. Yeah. You might know about Ark Survival Evolved. The fact that I talked a lot about it over the years. But if there's one thing that I have not mentioned already, it's the fact that Wildcard, the company behind the development and release of Ark Survival Evolved, had actually re-released the game known as Ark Survival Evolved Ascended. And on top of that, the game itself is literally the original, just remade and reformatted to work with Unreal Engine 5. So, you know what you're seeing here? Or hearing right now? They remade the game and made us re-buy it. Well, guess what? Dovetail did the exact same thing. I'm not kidding. Train Sim World 5 not only came out with original stuff, but get this. I've watched so many DLCs from all the other games, and they were made to work with even the latest installments. So you could have Train Sim World 3 or 4 and still have Train Sim World 1 or 2 related DLCs, as they are literally backwards compatible with the modernized games. Well, granted, these were made to run on Unreal Engine 4, but since Train Sim World 5 was made primarily as a contender for Unreal Engine 5, get this. I'm not kidding when I tell you that they made every single DLC so that we have to buy them again! Wow. What a way to waste our money. Like, can we get reimbursed for this stuff? Is this even legal? They just reformat the DLCs and we don't even get our money back from it? I mean, why make us rebuy the same thing twice? I mean, come on. That's like if I got my phone right here and then they take it back and then they force me to pay up another $700 for it. Like, what kind of legalized BS is that? Wow, just talk about robbing us right there. I mean, I guess one thing that I can at least acknowledge is that at least some of the DLCs that are upgraded to fit with Unreal Engine 5 can at least be re-downloaded for free. Like, half of the DLCs that I paid for can still be bought for free without me having to pay any additional fees to it. I bought the full game itself, the Ultimate version, on a 50% discount a month ago. But the thing is, why would they make you pay for all that stuff? So, okay. I feel like I'm getting a little off topic at this point here. The point that I'm intending to make here is that because the series has gotten a lot of traction, a lot of viewership, and a lot of money for Dovetail, it does make sense that they at least try to expand their horizons and visit new locations, as well as grant us more places to explore, given the money that we pay for I'd say that the quality of the place and the size of the files themselves are a bit questionable by any means. I will say that Train Sim World 5 in its current state with all the DLCs that I've gotten so far does add up to a heaping 165 gigabytes of data. And that's almost a fifth of my entire console storage. Granted, I'm sure that there probably are upgrades to your internal hard drive. I'd have to look into that and see if there's a proper technician who might be able to work on that sort of stuff. Most of the upgrades that I've gotten for the console itself were mostly on a cosmetic level, including some new faceplates, which were of carbon fiber. Yeah, instead of the original white plastic. But, again, I could probably understand the fact that because they had remade all these DLCs from the ground up in order for them to work in tandem with the latest installments, I would probably consider this more as to like an upgrade fee rather than it just being simply they force you to buy the same thing twice. And I'm sure that that's probably what they were intending to do here, to make us pay a higher price in order to get a higher quality version of the same DLC. But think about this. That'd be like if trying to purchase the PS4 version of the latest EA sports title or the PS5 version. We know that we have to pay extra for the higher quality version, which can guarantee us better graphics, better resolution and frame rate, and the other version just simply works on the console. It can kind of be more of a graphical level, while the other is more about performance, and it kind of is the same thing with some PS5 ports of some PS4 games, like Dragon Ball Z Kakarot. You might remember when I talked about that in the original HJN graphics, in which it did actually get itself a PS5 update. But keep in mind, this was actually a little while after I had already talked about Dragon Ball Z Kakarot, so I didn't necessarily have any clue that they were intending on bringing it over to the latest platform while also revamping it for a whole new line of gamers to enjoy Kakarot for the time being, because wouldn't you know that Bandai Namco, the same company that made Dragon Ball Z Kakarot, also came out with a later installment that came out only a few months ago called Dragon Ball Sparking Zero. Yeah. I might have to talk about that one now that I see it fit. But overall, the Train Sim World series, regardless of all the titles that have come out, regardless of all the locomotives we could purchase and play around with, all the rolling stock from freight to passenger cars, the livery designs that go on to most of the stuff, it doesn't really matter what kind of livery we go on either, because there actually are DLC packs that allow for us to have access to certain American heritage units, especially with the likes of Union Pacific and Norfolk Southern. So there's definitely a lot of variety that we can choose regarding originally made content by Dovetail themselves, while livery design is kind of more like a community-based setup, in which that's similar to other games like Hot Wheels Unleashed, in which you can make your own livery and share it with the community. Train Sim World has the same kind of approach, and I'm more than proud of what they were able to do for us railfanners. But I do have to mention, there are a good amount of YouTubers out there that are more than just railfanners simply waiting to get their hands on the latest installments and wanting to try the games out for themselves. I can at least tell you from my own perspective that watching others' impressions on the games sure have had a lot of feedback. That really goes to show that the more realistic the game is, the more you are willing to talk about it. And we know that that's probably one of the whole reasons why PS5 is seen as probably the greatest advantage in video game history. Up there with other recent consoles that we have gotten. They truly show just what kind of technological advancements we have gotten thus far. It does sort of make you wonder though. Up here in 2025, we're bound to at least get an announcement from the likes of Sony, Microsoft, Nintendo, and etc. Anybody who's willing to join in on all this console stuff and basically give us what kind of new console would they have to show us. PS6? I would almost wonder, what could that possibly look like? And more importantly, what would Train Sim World do on that sort of platform? I guess only time will tell. In terms of my overall scoring of the games themselves, it's kind of more of a score per piece agenda. As in, my overall feelings for all 5 of the games released thus far are kind of different. We know that with 1 and 2 I haven't had that much experience with, so I probably won't give them an overall scoring. 3, however, was the Big Daddy at the time, while 4 and 5 were more of just the mega expansions that we ended up paying full price for. Yeah, and they kind of are going in the same sort of direction that EA has been doing for a long time now. But 3, I will ultimately give an 8.9 out of 10.1, while 4 can get probably an 8.2 out of 10.1, and 5 about the same. I will say that while 4 and 5 did way more to expand on this whole craze, they were pretty much just what they were. 3 was basically all we needed here, and have all the content from 4 and 5 just as DLCs, you know? Like, we could have gotten some of that stuff like on their own, and that actually is what you could do in case you weren't wanting to buy the games themselves. You could get the Antelope line or S-Bahn or any of the other contents that came alongside the Train Sim World 4 and Train Sim World 5 title inclusions. But they do in fact pay up a similar fee just to get a hold of one of the routes. So, I mean, it's like you have no choice. At least I can at least acknowledge on the fact that because I had gotten a hold of the games while they were on big discounts, and granted they were released close to the end of each year when they came out, with September being the usual release date for these newer installments, that at least does give us the opportunity to eventually go in and purchase the game at a high discount, like during the holidays, for instance. So, on that note, I feel like I've said a lot about Train Sim World and all that was included up until this point. Maybe there could be a Train Sim World 6 coming in a few months from now. I can't be sure if I will intend on talking about that, but if I do, then well, I probably won't be back here on HJN for that, but that's probably where a new series could come in. Maybe something relative to the Talk About universe, like video games that deserve yeah. I probably still have to work on a name for that, but in any case, make sure to like, subscribe, comment, follow me wherever you can find me, and stay on the Hollywood side for more content.